Hi, Mo Kiss here with some bonus content for you coming from the Digital Analytics Power Hour. Today, I'm talking about a much hyped term, and that's growth hacking. Now, I hear a few people groaning already, but stay with us. I kind of think that the term growth hacking might be bullshit, which is why I really want to talk about it and debunk it and understand what growth actually is. I've invited my really good friend and analytics advocate, Krista Seiden from Google. I saw Krista present a while ago on this whole concept of growth, and there was crazy crowd applause when Krista said,
I hate the term growth hacking. We are not going to use that for the rest of this discussion. From now on, it's growth or growth marketing.
Nice. And so, round of applause. We're not going to use the term growth hacking. But what I do want to understand, because I guess what I picked up from your presentation that you did was that growth is something beyond what we've been doing in digital analytics. And I don't think I understood that, because to me, it kind of sounds like the same thing. So what is this concept to you?
Totally. And I've struggled with the same thing, or that idea that I don't really see much of a difference as I've been looking into this further and further. So it was explained to me a while ago that there are typically, the whole funnel stages of digital marketing or analytics. There's acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral. You know what I'm talking about. So I had a growth marketer explain to me that those first two stages, acquisition and activation, that kind of encapsulated what a digital marketer does. And a growth marketer is more focused on the entire funnel. Now, as somebody who has worked across this entire funnel my entire career, as I'm sure many listening to this podcast also can relate to, I took a bit of offense to this because I said, hey man, I do all of these things too. I just don't call myself a growth marketer.
Yeah, that hype term that we won't use. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, one thing that I think about, and maybe it's because I've always, in my current role, sit more on the product space. There's this view that somehow that growth marketers have more influence over product changes than, say, a digital analytics person might. What are your thoughts?
So I agree with that somewhat. I think that one of the biggest differences with growth marketing or growth teams in general is where they sit in a company or within a product and how they're organized. So typically a growth team is going to have some kind of a growth leader, a growth PM, somebody in engineering or development, a UX or design type person, and a product manager or analytics and experimentation type roles as well. And all of these different roles are going to work together towards a single goal. In the growth marketing space, this is often referred to as the North Star metric. So for example, Facebook might have a North Star metric early on of daily active users. Airbnb would have something like nights booked. And a North Star metric is just a single metric that best captures the core value that your product delivers to your customers. And I think what sets that apart from what we typically do in the digital marketing or analytics space is that there's so many different roles working together towards this single goal or single set of goals. And the organization, to your point, does sit closer to product or to engineering. So it may feel like there's a little bit more influence. I know we've talked about before where we sit in organizations. As a product analyst, you do feel you have a little bit more influence over the direction of the product than, say, a product marketing manager might.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm in my company, I can't really see a space for a particular growth team. And that's to do with the fact that we have a very different structure. We're cross-functional, that sort of thing, which means that our analysts sit really closely. We actually have a marketing innovation team that sit within our product team. But can you talk me through, you mentioned a couple of examples, a little bit how some companies are doing this and those North Star metrics. So is this kind of something a little bit more, how are people using this successfully and just not, another team?
Sure. So, I can give you an example of, let's say, Google Analytics or the Analytics 360 suite. So we have a few North Star metrics for Google Analytics. That would be monthly active users. For Optimize, it's monthly active experiments, Data Studio, monthly active users, and so on. So our overall North Star metric, our strategic driver, is really monthly active users. And a lot of our efforts, whether that be through our marketing team, through those running our ads, through our content and education teams, or even our product and engineering teams, are all working towards improving that one North Star metric. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So here's a tough question, and I'm only asking you this because I know you pretty well, and I know that one of the things that you're doing at the moment is working really within the product team in product management. I'm just trying to think, how does this play out when, for example, I'm in a product analyst role, and what happens when my organization uses objective key results, when that might conflict with, say, if you do have a growth team and you've got different improvements that you want to focus on or different objectives, like how does that balance work, even from, say, like a Google Analytics team perspective?
Sure. So first of all, the way you're describing your team setup, it sounds like you're already working on somewhat of a growth team. So I just want to put that out there. It's just the term.
Nailing it.
Welcome to this space where you can put this funny term on your resume and,
nice.
Get a lot more interest. I think one of the biggest differences between a growth-minded organization and a more traditional product and marketing-driven organization is the willingness to take risks. So I think that's the other piece of this whole growth or growth marketing mindset is constant experimentation. And while a company might be OKR-driven versus North Star metric-driven, I think those can still work together through this constant process of experimentation towards your overall OKRs, which should hopefully align with that North Star metric.
Yep, that makes sense. And do you think there are particularly, or as you've started delving into this topic, are there particular companies that are better suited to having, I guess, a growth team within them, or?
Yeah, so from what I've seen, and I think pretty typical in the industry, growth as a kind of function really started out of the startup scene. So a lot of startups would have a head of growth or a growth lead. It might just be one person at first, and they were really working on a lot of these experimentation-minded programs to drive growth throughout their business. Once that startup starts to grow a little bit, they might have a growth team instead of just a single head of growth, and that growth team is going to be a growth lead, a PM, a designer, and an analyst, maybe. And once that startup continues to grow, let's say they diversify their portfolio, they have multiple products or different business units, you might have a growth team in each area of the business. So Facebook has multiple growth teams focused on a lot of different efforts. LinkedIn is pretty famous for having, I think, 4 or 6 different growth teams focused on different areas of the business. Google's got growth teams throughout. So I think it really depends on the stage of the business in terms of how many people they have focused on this, where it might live. And the bigger the organization grows, the more embedded within different product lines a growth team might sit.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, I can see the overlap between what digital analysts have already been doing, and part of me feels like this is kind of an extension. I mean, it's just embedding that culture of experimentation, learning, really focusing on your primary or your North Star metric, which is a great term that I really like. And also, yeah, that it's really about enabling a team, I guess, and you can correct me if I'm not summarizing you accurately, giving a team everything it needs to make changes and stand alone, which I guess sometimes if you're a digital analyst, you're kind of sitting as part of some team, but you might not be able to see those actions through.
So I think you just hit it right on. I think that's the main difference is the organization of a growth team allows you to be free in making those changes and those tweaks much faster than a more traditionally organized company might, where you have a digital analyst on an analyst team who doesn't have the same pull or sway to say, hey, we should change this or try that. So I do think it's more about the organization than about the actual role. And kind of as we've both been saying all along, a lot of these responsibilities are things that we are already doing today. So congratulations for all growth marketers. And I think it really just depends on how flexible your organization is in terms of that organization that really allows you to take action on that.
Yeah, so there's one last thing that we haven't really touched on yet, which is something that my CTO is really passionate about. And some companies have a head of innovation, and they'll often put like engineers and cool, smart people into an innovation team. And her view on this, which I really applaud her for because I completely agree, is that innovation should be everyone's job and that you can't kind of make the cool, shiny stuff just be one team's job. It needs to sit across everyone. I almost feel like growth could potentially, because it is about a cultural shift and thinking differently, you could have that same danger of, by having a growth team, you kind of say to everyone else, well, it's not your job to experiment and so forth. What are your thoughts?
100%. I think that is a danger. I think often things are punted to one team or another despite how the organization is set up. I think that happens everywhere. I've seen that, in much more traditional organizations as well. I think that's up to the leadership of the company, or up to even the growth leader, anybody else, to say, hey, this is a mindset that we're really trying to push throughout the entire organization. Everybody is encouraged to drive innovation, drive experimentation, and really push this product or this movement forward. I do think, though, that there does need to be process around all of that, and that is where team structure and certain roles and responsibilities do come into play.
Okay. Well, you heard it here first. Growth hacking is bullshit. Growth and growth marketing, there's some solid stuff there. And I mean, for me, it's definitely given me a little bit of a different perspective on it. So thanks so much for your time, Krista.
Yeah, thanks for having me.